and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
And welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.TV. Thank you for joining in. We're going to get into a Ron Paul Liberty Report because he put out an interesting one, and the title of it doesn't really speak for the whole report, but it really gets into, you know, the dirty tricks that go on, and Ron Paul was someone that experienced that and seen that in the Republican National Convention, his last run for president. And when you see those dirty tricks played and more come out afterwards, that really kind of show that at the end of the day, the committee will decide who they will nominate. So being a part of the Republican, if Trump gets it because they allow him to get the nomination. Because they played enough dirty tricks with Ron Paul to ensure that he would not even come close to the votes that he would need. Even though Ron Paul said that, you know, it would be close, but he didn't think he had the votes. Well, they ensured that he didn't have the votes. And that's what was even dirtier. He probably didn't have the votes, but then it was too close for comfort for them. So we've seen the dirty tricks that happened there. And, you know, with this whole debate going on and Trump not going and hosting his own little thing, it's really a circus. People are like, you know, Trump did this and money goes to help. But, man, it's a circus, okay? It really was. That's what that whole thing was about, is creating a circus. And we have to acknowledge that. But I want to get into this Ron Paul Liberty Report. However you vote, the secret government always wins.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you again today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. There's an election going on. I don't know if you've noticed that or not, but wanted to talk about how important these elections are. You know, everything hangs on the balance. This is the most important election in all of history. You frequently hear this. This is the most important election. I guess you could make a case that we live in critical times, and maybe elections could be or should be important. But quite frankly, I've always downplayed the importance of elections because, I've been on the receiving end of distorted results and this sort of thing. And really, overall, it doesn't matter a whole lot. But if anybody raised these questions before, it was either, sour grapes, they didn't win, so they're complaining, or that's conspiracy stuff. So they don't ever consider the fact that elections, probably aren't nearly as important as they think. And I think very often that we put way too much emphasis on, is it going to be a Republican president or a Democrat president? We've spoken many times on this subject, and nothing ever really changes. I want to start off with talking about an article written by Jordan Michael Smith. I had it in the Boston Globe several months ago. And he talks about Michael Glennon, I believe his name, that has a book, is National Security and Double Government, arguing the case the people in government don't really run things. It's the people behind the scenes that really run things. And that might be one of the things that's happening today. A lot of people are waking up to this fact. The government's broken, and somebody else is running it. Nobody knows what's going on, so that's why we need armed might to take control of things. But the title to his article in the Globe was, "Vote All You Want, the Secret Government Won't Change," which is pretty striking. But there are others, and you may have heard this, don't vote at all because it only encourages them. Obviously, I have a somewhat different position because I thought voting was a worthwhile venture to try to change people's minds rather than thinking that my election was going to change the world. But if it's a vehicle for getting information out, I always thought it was a worthwhile effort to do this. So right now, we're looking at it. What do you think is the importance of having this election? How can we get something good out of what's going on? Because it's a circus, as far as I'm concerned, on so much what's happening in the presidential primary.
Well, what Glennon points out in his book that came out a couple of years ago is very similar to a new book that's out by Mike Lofgren. And Mike is a fellow that I've known over a number of years. We both worked in the House, and then Mike went over to the Senate side. Mike's book is The Deep State, The Fall of the Constitution and the Rise of a Shadow Government. So they both have very similar themes, and interestingly enough, they both came from a congressional background. So they saw a lot of things up close that you saw and that I saw. And the point that Mike makes in a recent interview in Salon magazine is that, despite how the title may sound, this is not a conspiracy about a secret government. This operates in broad daylight, the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, contractors, Homeland Security apparatus, Treasury, Justice Department, the courts, FISA. These all operate out in the open, and the people that are behind them with the power who move in and out of the so-called private sector and in government, they operate according to their own interests and completely independent of who is elected to elected positions. So the elected positions are almost like a Potemkin village of a pseudo-democracy when you have a permanent class in D.C. that runs things.
Mm-hmm. H.L. Mencken had a famous quote about elections. He says he didn't think too much of them either. He says an election is just an advanced auction on stolen goods. And money is a big deal on this. The people who run the government, like you mentioned, the military-industrial complex, maybe big medicine and big media and all these things, they get influence and they're able to get control, and it's money and power. But I've always said that it's very important what people think and do outside the government, because ultimately it's the philosophy of government that influences those people in Congress. They are not thinkers, so to speak. They're not the philosophers. And therefore, I work on the idea that we should change ideas and opinions, which I still think is true. But there's two groups out there. There's those of us who would like to change people's attitudes and understanding why you want very, very little government versus the other. We want government to be big, and we want to control it, and we'll go through this pretense that our elections are real important. But I think this comes, the one thing that has generated this mess is the principle that we follow. It's almost a sacred principle of democracy. You know, something that the founders abhorred, something that they didn't put in the Constitution. And they put liberty in the Constitution and protection of our freedom, but they never, idolized the concept of democracy. So we have this system. We concede, unfortunately, philosophically, that the government can steal money. Government has nothing. They produce nothing. The only thing they can do is steal it from somebody. So we set up a system where all you have to do is have the majority vote. And you build coalitions, and everybody is up for grabs and what they can get. And lo and behold, all they have to do is have a majority vote. So to me, it's such an evil. And the people who love democracy the most are the ones who represent the minorities. Well, if you're going to represent minority, the minority opinion has to be protected against the majority. So I see this concept that they can just rig the vote, and that's why elections are important. And unfortunately, we're in this mess, and the subject of is the answer in populism. Do you think that can solve our problems? Well,
Mike has a good point in a recent article that he also did. Actually, in a recent article he did for the Guardian, and I think he talks about the rise of Trump, and he makes some interesting points. And I'm going to actually just read one sentence because he points out the rise that people do instinctively understand that something is wrong, that they aren't having any control over what happens no matter how they vote, and he thinks that Trump is sort of a symptom of this, but people are turning to him. He said, but people instinctively sense there's something deeply wrong with the status quo, and therefore they're attracted to someone who pretends to be ready to smash down the status quo.
See, I think the system is there. It's supposed to serve the interests of those representing the democratic vote. So if they need food stamps and they voted, they get their food stamp. If they need a military-industrial complex, scare the people, and then they vote for all this militarism. But I think you have to change the nature of government. You shouldn't have anything up for sale. The government should be expected to protect our freedoms of choice and to protect our freedoms of our earning capacity, our life, liberty, and property. That's what the government should be for. But they say, well, no, that's daydreaming. You can't do that. The founders were dreamers too, but they had given us a pretty good outline. But this system, you would say, well, Ron, why don't you give it a little break? Because we'll get noble people. We'll get people of high character who will go in and spread their wealth fairly and not have allowed the military-industrial complex to coerce them into building weapons that aren't necessary. So I think even if you put those very responsible people, people are so fallible and they make mistakes when you're in government and you make these mistakes, but you're always influenced by ideas, and the propaganda out there is ISIS is coming, we got to stop it, we got to stop it. And they say, well, we have to spend the money. So I think that we should work for the ideal of restraining government to be able to pass out these favors and make it very, very narrow. And the big challenge for us is that a viable option? How many people are going to listen to it? I happen to think more today than yesterday.
And I think that's the problem. Some of our friends on the left to identify this problem, and many do. I mean, Bill Moyers has done a lot in his career about the secret government and this sort of thing. Unfortunately, I think they often miss the real point. They sense the problem, but they will blame the money and capitalism as such, not recognizing the distinction between how that money is gained. Is it gained in manipulating government contracts? So look how Washington works. The think tanks produce papers talking about dangers of a terrorist threat. The media picks up on these and runs it through. And then next thing you know, you have a contract with a large military contractor. But if you look at where the contractor spends his money, he puts money into the think tanks to put out these scary reports. So they'll spend $1 million on a think tank and get $1 billion weapon system.
See, I don't think they see it as I do, that we shouldn't have government with so much authority. The authority is okay as long as you have good people doing good things here at home and not fighting wars like a liberal might do. But they do not accept this principle. We have some very good allies on the war issue, but they would use more government authority, to steal from one group and give to another, and saying, well, it's necessary, it has to be fair, and look at what would happen if you didn't have socialism and welfarism and having a fair system of redistribution. But they are using the armed force of government to do this. They don't look at it and say, they're really stealing. They're stealing in the name of the people, and they're doing it for humanitarian reasons. Well, we have to go to war in Syria. Do they say we have to go to war for Syria for fun? No, it's always couched in humanitarian terms. We have to go there to save the Syrian people from this monster. And of course, an imperfect leader or dictator of a country isn't necessarily the worst, because once you get involved, then you destroy the very people that they pretend to do this. So I think it's basically looking at this whole principle of authoritarianism, the use of aggression, and the unwillingness to concede that people are quite capable of working in a voluntary society and sorting out these problems in a different way. Far from perfection, but when you take the imperfection of man and place him in charge of a lot of people and a lot of money and everything that goes on, not only in our country, but in our courts as well as internationally, and controlling international organizations, and like we just talked about just recently about the authority to go to war, anytime, any place, and having a worldwide military state. So this is why the fundamentals have to be to attack this principle of why have we granted to the government this use of aggression and the use of guns in a most illegal, immoral manner.
Yeah. Talk about going to war with this declaration. It reminds me of another thing that both of these authors wrote about that I appreciate, and I know you do, because both of us spent a good portion of our careers working in Congress, working in the legislative branch. And they both point out the congressional role in this deep state. One of the Michael Glennon points out that Congress often defers to experts, and the experts are people that have been permanently employed in Congress. The average member is too busy worrying about being reelected every 2 years or 6 years. And Mike Lofgren points out that there are certain people in congressional leadership that really do control things. Certain committee chairs, he points out defense and intelligence committees. I would add permanent staff. And I remember this over the years that I was there. The permanent staff never changed. The permanent staff drafted the legislation, changed the legislation, wrote the manager's amendments. All of these things were happening behind the scenes, and they were there for their entire careers. And some of them had their own personal agendas that they were able to slip through here and there. So I would say definitely Capitol Hill is a place where the secret government is alive and well.
One temptation by many is the solution is an in-between. Government's bureaucratic and inept, and they get out of control and are influenced. But they come up with this idea that the function of government ought to be privatized, private prisons and private military and all these kind of things. But I don't see that as a solution at all. I think that's another combination of big government and corporations. This whole idea that so much of our military is run by private sources, and they make big profits doing this. So I don't see that as a solution. I see the solution as reducing the size and scope and power, of the government.
Let's hope these two books will start a conversation in that area.
Yeah, there you go. But I would like to thank everybody today for tuning in to the Liberty Report. I would like to just close by making a point that we're complaining about, outside sources, financial interests, people who have power, people in the military-industrial complex, the people in secret, whether it's the CIA, are really in charge, and elections don't mean a whole lot. And elections too often can be rigged. And when you look at how powerful the media is a system that doesn't lend itself to the preservation of liberty. But I think very seriously that the outsiders are really always the ones who influence government, both good and bad. Today we're seeing the bad influence of outsiders getting control of government and enriching themselves. But I think ideas have consequences. So if the ideology of liberty, the ideology of sound money and private property and free economic policies, this This is what eventually infiltrates to the minds of men and to a whole generation. And those individuals who are in Washington, they won't automatically buy into this notion that government should be allowed to use force to redistribute wealth and pretend they can rule the country and tell people what to do. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report, RonPaulLibertyReport.com, and Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube. Check them out. Subscribe. Now, we look at this secret government, and it's really not secret anymore, but it has more tentacles. Basically, they realize with a bigger population, you must influence enough people everywhere. And that's how they keep their power. And then they're very violent towards anyone that opposes that. Just like a gang, a mafia, cartel. You oppose our power and we react with violence. And it's an authoritarian thing, and, you know, whether it's taking your money through taxation to pay for things that we don't agree on. And, you know, he points out that the founders never wanted democracy. It was about protecting the individual's liberty. But we have allowed this democracy somehow to push its way where the majority has rule over the rest of the people, get to dictate and use force. And problems with this arose early in American history, but to the extreme that we have now is it's definitely reaching a high, I believe. Even though the police brutality thing can be exaggerated to a point, for the crimes that a lot of brutality happens, can't be ignored. Roughing people up for victimless crimes like smoking marijuana. It's ridiculous. You know, hearing stories from my grandparents, parents, about things that happened to them and how a sheriff or someone would pull over and help them out. And getting pulled over, being teenagers, and how law enforcement interacted with them. It's not that way anymore. And what they don't realize is they're being used, law enforcement that being, and so is the public. Again, divide and conquer. Okay, well, let me get into this article if I can find it here. I don't know what happened to it. All the articles disappeared. Okay. Getting into the election, I have an article here by Steve Watson out of Infowars.com. Paul declares he is only candidate for the Liberty vote. Commanding debate performance from the Libertarian senator. Most accounts from last night's GOP debate, the official one, not the Trump one, had Rand Paul down as the winner, including time, declaring Paul took full advantage of his primetime slot. Perhaps Paul's most powerful spot came when he declared that he is the only candidate for the Liberty vote. Paul took a swipe at Ted Cruz, noting that the Texas senator skipped the audit the Fed vote after Cruz claimed that he could attract Libertarian support. Paul urged that the Liberty vote will stay in the family, a direct nod to his father, Ron Paul. When asked by moderator Brett Baer, did you make a mistake by not more fully embracing your father politically at the beginning of the campaign, Paul provided a commanding answer. There's probably no person I respect more in the country or in recent history than my father, Paul said. I think he was probably the most honest man in politics that we've ever seen in a generation. And so in no way have I ever said that I don't embrace my father or love my father or appreciate everything that he's done for the country. Paul then clarified his Liberty vote credentials by criticizing both National Security Agency metadata collection, saying that the bulk collection of your phone data and the invasion of your privacy did not stop one terrorist attack. If we want to collect the records of terrorists, let's do it old-fashioned way by using the Fourth Amendment. Paul also slammed the war on drugs, saying it has disproportionately affected our African American community. Quote, drug use is about equal between white and black, Paul said, but 3 out of 4 people in prison are black or brown. The Kentucky senator also spoke about the government engaging in over-criminalization, noting, I've been a believer in Congress about trying to bring about criminal justice reform. Paul was the only candidate qualified to give a detailed and nuanced answer to a question regarding criminal justice. I've been trying to look for solutions to our criminal justice system, he noted. One thing I discovered in Ferguson was that 1/3 of the budget in the city of Ferguson was getting reaped by civil fines. He continued, people were being fined to death. You and I, or many people in this audience, if we get $100 fine, we can survive it. If you're living on the edge of poverty and you get $100 fine or your car towed, a lot of times you lose your job. Other Paul highlights include Paul's thoughts on abortion, which he said is always wrong. I think it would be better the less abortions we have. So the more states that we have that made abortion illegal, the better as far as trying to save and preserve lives, Paul said. Paul also blasted Hillary Clinton, noting that she has taken millions and millions of dollars from regimes in the Middle East that treat women like cattle. She can't be a champion of women's rights at the same time she's got this that is always lurking out there, this type of behavior, Paul stated. While the other candidates used their final statements to attack each other, Paul focused on his fiscal policy. I've gotten to do some incredible things, got to be on the floor of the Senate, and it's been amazing to me, Paul said. But the thing that is most important to me and caused me to run for office is I'm worried about the country and how much debt a lot of people are saying the libertarian Rand is back. I've heard speculation out there about, has he been on the internet recently can see why he doesn't have the support of, well, a lot of the country that supported him running for office. And a lot of it has been, he shied away from the libertarian side. A lot of people believe to try to coerce people from more of the mainstream arena. But, all this will come to show if he gets the nomination. Some polls are showing him doing very well in the debates. Some showing him between second and fourth, I believe, was the lowest I've seen him. And that was below Rubio. If you even call yourself a little bit of libertarian and you go, Rubio's good, no, you're not even close to libertarian. Cruz, I'm sure he could be manipulated into believing he has a lot of libertarian beliefs, but he don't. Paul, he's going to be the closest thing to a libertarian you'll ever probably get, other than his father, which is not running. When it comes to people that are in the political sphere or been in the political sphere. Now, there are many people out there that could run. People that run on the libertarian ticket. People that don't run at all. There's plenty of libertarians out there. But to get a libertarian on one of the main parties, I don't see anybody else stepping up to that place. So, we'll see what happens. I think it's still a little early to know where this is going to go. I had another article here that was out of the Libertarian Republic talking about his debate response, Rand Paul's debate response to the defining moment for Republicans. Rand Paul was asked a question relating back to Ferguson, Missouri, during the Fox News Republican debate Thursday night, and his response may be a pivotal moment for the Republican Party. Since announcing his presidential bid, Paul has frequently said, although I was born into America that experiences and believes in opportunity, my trips to Ferguson, Detroit, Atlanta, and Chicago have revealed that there is an undercurrent of unease. The unexpected rise in the popularity of candidates like Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump illustrate this point with a frightening reality that the Republican Party is falling apart despite their physically conservative streak. Young Americans still struggle to find their place in a party they construe as antiquated. Whether Rand Paul succeeds in winning the nomination or not, it is no doubt that he will be revered as the Republican candidate who said at first, Ronald Reagan of the next generation. There is hope for a better, stronger Republican Party if we have liberty at the center of it. And I'm going to play that little moment right here.
The technology available to better protect our communities.
Senator Paul, that question to you.
You know, I've supported legislation to allow body cameras. I've been to Ferguson. I've been trying to look for solutions to our criminal justice problem. One thing I discovered in Ferguson was that a third of the budget for the city of Ferguson was being reaped by civil fines. People were just being fined to death. Now, you and I and many of the people in this audience, if we get a $100 fine, we can survive it. If you're living on the edge of poverty, you get a $100 fine or your car towed, a lot of times you lose your job. I also think the war on drugs has disproportionately affected our African American community. And what we need to do is make sure that the war on drugs is equal protection under the law and that we don't unfairly incarcerate another generation of young African American males.
Okay, I guess that cut out a little early. A little technical difficulty, but there wasn't but a few seconds left. Okay. Now, if we look at what would happen, let's say, if Rand Paul got into office, how much changes would he be able to make? It matters how libertarian he is, or even constitutional. Executive orders, if you're pretty constitutional, libertarian, you don't believe too much in them. But you also realize where the country's at. And I think that even a libertarian would try to use executive action, then they would be challenged. I think there would become a problem when you actually try to use that executive action to try to reverse what they've done. So we can see vetoes happening. Slowing the rate of decay, I think, is the only thing. And again, it goes back to local. Okay. Now, I had this article here at truthandmedia.com. Bipartisan coalition of lawmakers introduce anti-surveillance bills. And a lot of people, we talk about state rights and things like that. The American Civil Liberties Union and the 10th Amendment Center have partnered with lawmakers from 16 states to introduce counter-surveillance legislation on January 20th. Anthony D. Ramiro, Executive Director of the ACLU, and Michael Bolden, Executive Director of the 10th Amendment Center, released an op-ed through Time announcing the new legislation and calling for a partnership between conservatives and progressives. Bolden and Ramiro discuss the increase in cell phone surveillance from tools like stingrays and tracking from automatic license plate readers, which track the public's driving habits. Their concern extends not only to government institutions, but corporations who are willing to capture and sell personal data of customers. The legislation comes from both political parties spread across the United States, including the District of Columbia, Hawaii, North Carolina, Minnesota, Alabama, New Hampshire, and New Mexico. The ACLU is supporting the bills as part of their campaign, #TakeCTRL, nationwide privacy push. The campaign offers a map showing the participating states and explanations of each bill introduced. The bills deal with personal data privacy, location tracking through Stingray, cell site simulators, automatic license plate readers, employee and student loans, social media privacy, and protection from students' personal technology on campus. Each bill offers protections that guarantee the right for each individual to be in control of maintaining their private personal information. Golden Ramir wrote, Americans have grown tired of hearing stories like that of former college hockey player Megan Donahue, who quit her team because she did not want to give her coaches access to her social media accounts, or high school student Blake Robbins, who school remotely accessed the webcam on the laptop it issued him and took pictures of him while he undressed. Another focus of the bill is to force law enforcement agencies to get a warrant if they desire to use new technologies to access someone's private communications. When it comes to corporate access to Americans' data, the coalition is calling for corporations to get clear and express permission to do so. As the ACLU and 10th Amendment Center recognize, the laws have not kept up to pace with technology that is being employed by the military and law enforcement. If every state passed their legislation and enacted privacy protections such as warrants, it would still not stop invasions by federal agencies, which are also known to have similar technology. The coalition ends their letter with a call for unity in action. We note that this is a fight that will continue, but with conservatives and progressives standing united, it's a fight we can win. And that was out of truthandmedia.com. And I think if you get most states, almost all states, pass similar legislation, what you're going to have is a federal push for the same. And I think it would be hard for them to counter that. Okay. Moving along here. Kind of back to the whole election thing, you know, when we see the debates, we have Donald Trump. I'm not going to participate in the debates. You're the front runner. I don't like Megyn Kelly. She insulted me. Well, get the hell over it. People insult people. This is an ego thing, and people can't. I just don't see how people don't see this guy how he is. I can't see through these people's eyes, and you know, it bugs me because it's like I'm seeing something they can't see, and I'm like, look at it, do something, stop supporting this guy. But it also gets to a point where we look at the whole thing as a circus in the first place, and I'm just saying it bugs the hell out of me, and I can't take it. It just, why would you support this guy? But, you know, people are, and I think people are just so fed up that they're willing to look for any way out. Well, Christopher Green had his own feelings about Donald Trump, real talk about Donald Trump on AMTV. And I'm going to play this clip here. I might not play it all, but I'll play most of it. But, you know, when I just look at things he says and how he says it, how he reacts to situations, and I don't want this guy in control of the military. I think it would be scary with this. His influence in politics already has been, you know, damaging for people. You know, using eminent domain to get rid of people so he can use their property for what he wants and make money off of, you know. It's amazing. It really is. Do you want to give this guy control of? Well, you're a warmonger then. You want to go hurt people, and it's okay as long as it's not you being hurt. Kind of the hypocrisy, I believe. But, you know, he says a lot of other things that you're like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't think he's dumb. I think he has intelligence, but I think his ego's a little bit big. But I also look at things he said in the past, things he's went along with in the past, his, you know, relationships with people in the past, not, you know, girlfriend type. I'm talking about with, you know, being buddy with certain people. And I don't know. I don't trust the guy. But right now, you know, according to the polls, he's leading. So we'll see. But Christopher Green, Real Talk About Donald Trump, AMTV on YouTube.
How much did you lose?
Please visit our sponsor, BattleBox.com. That's BattleBox. Take a look at these boxes, folks. This ain't your girlfriend's box. Subscribe today, and it's like Christmas at your doorstep once a month. Receive hand-picked tactical, survival, EDC, and other cool gear from some of the most innovative companies we could find. Kick-ass examples include concealed carry holsters, watches, hammocks, tactical belts, and more. Free shipping for Pro and Pro Plus subscribers. Subscribe today. Enter promo code TVBattle for 10% off your first box. Cancel at any time. It's like Christmas at your doorstep once a month. That's BattleBox.com. Subscribe now.
Hey, everybody. I'm Christopher Green, and you're tuning into AMTV, Alternative Media Television. This is January 28, 2016. This is Real Talk about Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is a marketing genius. He really is. By opting out of the Republican national debate, courtesy of Fox, courtesy of Megyn Kelly, blood coming out of wherever, he makes the entire event about him. He supersedes every single other candidate, namely Ted Cruz. So he really is a marketing genius. He's a PR stuntman. I've been over this time and time again, many times before. He understands the media. In fact, we even had some of our crew shoot Donald Trump when he was here in Mesa. And he was directing traffic as to how to set up the camera angles and what he wanted to see. Because, again, he's a media tycoon. He's a media tycoon. So Donald Trump really is a marketing genius. He basically steals the limelight from his closest GOP competitor, Ted Cruz, and it's working in his favor. So anybody playing the argument, saying that he'll be criticized because he can't somehow handle criticism, or that if he becomes president, he'll face tough decisions if he has to meet Middle Eastern leaders that don't like him, or Russian President Vladimir Putin, that, you know, what is he going to do? Is he going to run away? Is he running away? No, he's not running away. This is a marketing stunt, and it's working in his favor. And it's exactly what he should do. He should turn off the mainstream media. He should raise money for wounded warriors. He should go full bore. He should raise millions tonight, if possible. And he should do what's right for the country and what's right for the people. And it's, in my opinion, the principal reason why Donald Trump, I'm looking at my dog. You know, this is real talk, guys. We're hanging out here. My dog's about to bark at someone through the window. Damn doggy. But anyways, this is working in Donald Trump's favor. Now, what concerns me about Donald Trump is that he's the type of guy, it's his way or the highway, right? I'm afraid, and this is a criticism I have of him, and I support Donald Trump's candidacy because I believe you've got to work within the system. The same reason that Barack Obama was a Manchurian candidate that worked through the system to radically overthrow and hijack this great country, the United States of America, which is exactly what he's done. Now, we have to work within that same system, and the principal reason why I really like Donald Trump is because he's ruffling the feathers of the GOP establishment, of the GOP party. They don't like him. They don't want him there. He's an outsider, and he's basically shaking up the bush. All those things are positives. But what does scare me about him is that it is his way or the highway, and he has a massive ego. And the fear is this the type of guy that will listen to other people? Is it only his opinions, the right opinion, and nobody else's? You know, things that he's not an expert in. You know, things that his advisors, as president, you have advisors, bring you certain information. You should listen to your advisors. Now, having an ego, I believe, is essential to being a powerful, strong leader. I think we see these qualities in leaders like Vladimir Putin, for example, who, in my opinion, is a much stronger leader than Barack Obama, who I view as a wimp, a pansy, and a baby. But I hope personally, I think many of you probably do too, that Donald Trump doesn't have such a bloated ego that he doesn't listen to the right people or understand that he's not always right. I mean, he can believe in himself. He's got to make decisions. He's got to be that powerful figure. But he also needs to listen to the people around him. He needs to evaluate all the information as president of the United States when making strategic geopolitical decisions, running this country, working on behalf of the American people. Remember, these people are elected officials. They're not kings and they're not queens. I think Donald Trump understands that. I actually view him, I think he's smarter than most people think. It's one of the reasons I think he's so brilliant as a marketing PR stunt man, right? The Art of the Deal, one of his famous books that he's written. There's a reason why he's successful. There's a reason why he's leading the polls. There's a reason why he's won every single debate thus far. There's a reason he's committing this publicity stunt, and it's working in his favor once again, because he understands marketing, PR, politics, and he understands business. And so he's got a host of experience managing hundreds, if not thousands of people, running profitable companies. He's got a sizable net worth, which honestly is kind of paltry compared to a lot of these guys. What is Mayor Bloomberg, former Mayor Bloomberg, what is his net worth? The Bloomberg Systems and all that. It's like $40 billion. Trump is worth an estimated $5 to $10 billion. So he's really not that wealthy, even though he wants his ego, and he's wealthy comparatively to, you or I, or the regular people in America. But he's really not that powerful. He's still an outsider. And that's what I think Americans need to realize. The establishment does not want Donald Trump as president of the United States. I also find it interesting that I haven't heard anything, unless some of you have, maybe in a tweet or something like that. I haven't heard Donald Trump talk at all about Oregon and the shootout and the controversy over there with the Hammond family, which I think just tells you how controversial that situation actually is. Obviously, Donald Trump's aware of it. He's been following the story. There's reports out now that Lavoy Finicum was shot 100+ times. I don't know personally if that's true or not, but I certainly do not believe the federal government at all. But it's interesting that Trump has kind of avoided that situation, hasn't spoken about it, hasn't talked about it for a reason. Personally, I would like to see Donald Trump as the next president of the United States for all the reasons listed above, because I believe truly you have to work within the system the same way that Barack Obama was a Manchurian candidate and has radically overthrown and hijacked this country. The guy I like best next, who I think is a realistic candidate who potentially could have a chance, although I don't see it happening, is Ted Cruz. I like a lot of his politics. My personal favorite in the GOP party is Rand Paul, but he doesn't have a realistic shot of actually becoming president. Again, you've got to work within the system. It's why Donald Trump, we've been covering him with a lot more fanfare and a lot more vigor, because he has a realistic chance and shot of becoming president of the United States. But honestly, and some of you guys might not like this, the guy I probably like next best, if that makes sense, is Bernie Sanders. not because I identify myself as a democratic socialist at all. I don't believe in that. I'm a capitalist. That's kind of my category, if we want to categorize ourselves, which is stupid that we have to categorize ourselves. But I believe that, you should pull yourself up by your bootstraps. I've been influenced by my family, my parents, my grandparents that did that ran businesses, that worked hard, that came from nothing, that came from the Great Depression, made something out of themselves, were conservative with their money, and were successful. I believe in that process. So I consider myself a capitalist. The same things we do with AMTV. We built it out of our basement. Now we have a small studio. I've got, this boutique shop with, several people helping us with our program now. All this was created by us, by you, created from nothing. These are all concepts I believe in. But I actually like Bernie Sanders in the regard that one of the primary principles of his platform is to go after the sea-suckers that make up the bankster elite in this country and breaking up the too-big-to-fail multi-trillion-dollar bailout banks. Because honestly, the money problems in this country, the Federal Reserve problem, this criminal private entity is the root of most of the problems in America today, because money controls everything. That illusion of monetary value of the printing presses that create money from nothing, created by nothing, used to enslave the masses on a mass scale. So I like that about him. Honestly, if we can't get Trump in there, I'd like to see Bernie Sanders in there. I'd like to see Hillary Clinton taken down by the FBI, which she's probably soon, hopefully, to be indicted. I don't know if she'll be convicted or not, but hopefully indicted. And I would like to see Bernie Sanders go in and basically tear up these big banks a new asshole. I think it'd be wonderful. I think it'd be fantastic. And I think it would be great. So that's probably my second pick. Donald Trump I like. Again, he's an outsider, but he's also dangerous. That's the honest to God truth. That's real talk. Because again, what you're tuning into is real. That's why the same reason I'm not, shooting from a multi-million-dollar studio, and I'm not working with a multi-billion-dollar budget courtesy of CNN, because this is real. Trump is dangerous. I hope that we're underestimating him. And I think we probably are. I think he's probably smarter than most people think. It's why he's been such an effective stuntman. It's why he's leading the polls everywhere. It's why even dropping out of the presidential debate on Fox tonight is working in his favor. But there is an element of danger there. And Trump also needs to go after the banks. He also needs to go after the mass NSA, National Spying Agency, surveillance state that has been created here in America, this 1984 Orwell society that has us all living in absolute tyranny and fear on a regular basis. These issues need to be addressed. And again, it's a little bit telling, but I understand it because, again, this is politics. It's interesting to me that Trump hasn't spoken about the Oregon issue at all, but it's because it's too divisive to really talk about. It's too controversial. It's why you'll only get it here at AMTV, a part of alternative media television, which, again, we built this, you built this, we built this from the ground up by our bootstraps. And it's interesting to see all this mainline now. It's interesting to see it mainstream into pop culture. You see it with pioneers like Alex Jones of InfoWars, Glenn Beck. You see it with the new X-Files series, actually basing one of the characters on Alex Jones. You see it mainlining it. I saw this with Dr. Drew on TV. I rarely watch TV, but sometimes I do for market research. And I'm watching Dr. Drew, and they're talking politics. But they're doing it in this Ricky Lake kind of way, covering the Flint water crisis issues and covering Trump. It's interesting to see it mainline. But these are the impersonators, right? What we're seeing on mainstream boob tube. These guys are fake. It's not real. Yes, pioneers like Alex Jones, real. Pioneers like Glenn Beck, real. Love them or hate them, real. What you get here, authentic. What we're seeing hit the mainstream is only a byproduct of this, and I've heard others say it, and I believe it to be true, cultural revolution, media revolution, which has become this alternative framework that makes up AMTV and alternative media television today. Absolutely amazing. It shows you the impact that the people can have. It shows you that we can literally go, and some of you know this because you've been with me from the very beginning when I had like 100 subscribers. And people used to make fun of me because they said, oh, you probably, work out of your grandmother's basement or something. Well, no, I wasn't working out of my grandmother's basement, but I was working out of a bedroom and technically a basement. And now we're sitting in a large studio with crew, and we're actively trying to grow even further, and we're seeing all of this mainstream and mainline and have a dramatic influence with public dialogue and discourse. We're changing the public narrative. We're having a massive influence. The same reason politically incorrect figures like Donald Trump have basically hijacked the media for free. I mean, he gets on all these programs for free, works it in his favor, and has dramatically ruffled the feathers and kind of destroyed the establishment model that once was, and very likely could be the next president of the United States of America. Absolutely amazing. Same reason guys like Ted Cruz are extremely popular. So hopefully that better explains, why I'm in favor of Donald Trump, what I really think about him. It's not that I don't see dangers in Donald Trump. It's not that I don't see inconsistencies, things that I think he should be talking about, things that I think he should be going after, but we're not going to get the perfect candidate. We have to work within the system until, maybe one of you someday with a small platform like we have at AMTV becomes the next president of the United States, who doesn't need multi-billions of dollars to run like Trump does. He honestly needs that. He needs billions. It wouldn't happen without the billions. And we take money out of politics, something that Bernie Sanders has talked a lot about. And we take these elitists out of this structure, which has just created this oligarchical environment, which is what America is today, living a lie, living an illusion, where, people protesting the Hammond family enslavement and being sent back to prison for 5 years are called militants and terrorists by the mainstream media and the establishment, when they're just protesting, which is their not only God-given right, but constitutional right. Because again, this country has been radically transformed. It's been hijacked by a Manchurian candidate. It's been hijacked by criminal elites like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. This giant moral hazard, this criminality that we see in Washington in conjunction with big money in politics today and the oligarchs that own them. It's time for a change. I hope we get that change. It should be really interesting to see in the next couple of days as we approach the Iowa caucuses how this fares, how Bernie Sanders fares, if he's able to edge out, maybe in a repeat like what we saw in 2008. Hillary Clinton, as Barack Obama did, which was like the final nail in the coffin. If Trump can stay the course, if this continues to work in his favor, and there's not that remote possibility, I will always identify remote possibilities, although I don't think it's realistic. People saying, well, Trump's going to bail out last minute and then give it to Hillary Clinton. Yet possible, not likely. I never saw that as a realistic intention, is the word. Never saw that. I don't know Trump personally, but from everything that I've seen from Trump, and based on how the establishment has reacted to him and the mainstream media, tells me this guy's for real. He's really ruffling the feathers. He's not wanted by the elitist GOP party behind closed doors. The people I know, the people I talk to do not like this guy. In my opinion, that's a good thing, because that's exactly what we want. We want to tear up this establishment, a new asshole, basically, to be frank. Just like Barack Obama hijacked this country, we want to take it back. I think Trump is the guy to do it. Again, this is Real Talk about Donald Trump. Get it out everywhere. I'm Christopher Green. You're watching Alternative Media Television, AMTV, hard hitting it in your face. Again, thank you for all your support. Thank you for all of you that are subscribing actively. Some of our new subscribers that have subscribed just this week to AMTV On Demand. You are supporting our growing infrastructure at only $4.95 a month and $49.95 a year. Not only do you get all of our content first, also ad-free, but you get exclusive content. And I'm going to be doing a lot more of that, and I have high expectations this year to take what we're doing to the...
Okay. I'm stopping it there. Now, I disagree with him on a lot of things. I do think Donald Trump is ruffling the feathers, though. I think he really is going after the establishment that's been in charge. when I look at him in a negative light, I look at him more as someone that doesn't want to toe a party line, doesn't want to toe anything, but wants to rule. It's not that he's anti-authoritarian. It's that it's him, not the party, or he wants control. And again, I do think he has good ideas, but he goes beyond having the good ideas into more of a fascistic type rhetoric. And, he said Rand Paul doesn't have a chance. Well, if Rand Paul doesn't have a chance, if Ted Cruz doesn't have a chance, but Donald Trump does, when he's so against being a part of the party, at least that's what he plays, he wouldn't get the nomination. I think Ted Cruz would be the closest. But I think eventually in the end we'll see where this goes. I don't, people haven't been talking about it lately, but they were talking about, he'll end up dropping out. I think, you're going to have a point where he's either going to drop out or possibly just drop in popularity. I don't know. It's hard telling. He might actually get the nomination. I don't know. We'll end up seeing, but I really don't trust him to be a better president, just a different style and type of president, more fascistic, dictator type. I'm going to do it my way. It's a highway. Talk about liberty a little bit, but then talk about how he's going to walk all over it. Kind of. I think we're going to be doing exactly what we always do and get someone that gets your emotions going and you're not really paying attention to what he's actually saying. Even though we made it a little bit past the top of the hour, I did want to stop to mention you can help support this broadcast and others here on UCY.tv. Just go to UCY.tv. There's a support tab and you can donate and help the network stay broadcasting so me and the other hosts here have a platform to get this information out to you and have these discussions. Also, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's an Amazon button. If you're someone that shops online, shops through Amazon, if you haven't ever shopped through Amazon, you should check them out. Really good deals, good shipping prices, and you're getting the same great deals and same great shipping prices that you would if you went directly to them. But by going through that little link, that little Amazon button down at the bottom, the little A, you're also helping the network out. They get a little kickback. And UCY's made a really, really great store that allows you to get good prepping, camping gear, and then you can also shop for anything else you want on Amazon. So go check them out, UCY.tv. Scroll down to the bottom, click that Amazon tab, or again, you can donate. There's a support tab at the top of the page. So go check them out. Just one article here I wanted to cover over the economy. This out of CNBC. Stocks end up 2% after BOJ move. Still worst month in NASDAQ since 2010. U.S. stocks closed more than 2% higher percent Friday. The last trading day of January after the Bank of Japan unexpectedly adopted a negative interest rate policy for the first time, encouraging earnings reports. A better than expected Chicago PMI report and some stabilization in oil prices also helped push equities higher. The major averages still posted their worst January in at least 7 years on a monthly basis. The NASDAQ composite fell 7.86% for its worst month since 2010. However, Friday's sharp gains pushed the three indexes into positive territory for the week. I think the BOJ got it going, said Jeremy Klein, chief market strategist at FBN Securities. While he was skeptical of the actual benefit of the negative rate policy to the economy, he said it is a signal that it signals they are basically walking their talk. Stocks rallied into the close with the Dow Jones Industrial ending up more than 390 points. The S&P 500 surged nearly 2.5% to close within 10% of its 52-week intraday high. Out of correction territory, information technology gained more than 3.5% to lead all 10 sectors higher. I always love when they use out of correction or in correction territory. Yeah, correction from what? From when? And that's the problem. You can read the rest of that article, and that's at CNBC. Stocks end up 2% after BOJ move. Still worst month in NASDAQ since 2010. That's the problem. Still worst month. This isn't a positive thing. This is just BS that's manipulating the market. And again, the market will correct itself because this is not showing anything helpful. Oh, Japan, went in the negative territory on the interest rate. Okay, so they're creating a bubble. Cool. That's going to pop. One other article I do want to cover here, and this was MarketWatch.com. U.S. GDP fizzles in the fourth quarter. The economy bogged down at the end of 2015, raising questions about whether U.S. growth is losing momentum. Gross domestic product, the value of everything a nation produces, expanded at a 0.7% annual rate from October to December. That's a big markdown from 2% growth in the fall and 3.9% last spring. The economy expanded at a 2.4% clip last year, the same as in 2014. The Commerce Department said the U.S. hasn't topped 3% growth since 2005. Softer consumer spending, falling exports, and smaller buildup in business inventories were largely the cause of the fourth quarter slowdown. Fresh government data showed inflation waned again. The poor GDP report comes at a delicate time. U.S. stock markets have suffered big losses early in the new year, and key segments of the economy such as manufacturing, energy, and retailing are weak. The dimmer landscape has even raised questions about whether the Federal Reserve was right to raise interest rates in December for the first time in almost 10 years. A move taken because the central bank viewed the economy as much improved. In many ways, the economy does seem healthier. The number of new jobs created in the fourth quarter, for example, was the strongest of the year. The housing market continues to gain momentum, and consumers are more confident and better off financially now than they've been in years. The big question as the first quarter nears the halfway point is which view of the economy is right. The Fed is betting on a quick rebound, saying earlier this week that it expects the U.S. to expand at a moderate pace. If so, the U.S. economy will have to buck recent history. Growth in the first quarter has been much slower than the rest of the year since the nation exited recession in mid-2009. We did? One reason, unusual bad winter weather in recent years, and the eastern half of the U.S. just got socked by a huge snowstorm that kept millions of Americans indoors for days. Inside the GDP report, the amount of money spent by consumers increased at a 2.2% annual pace in the final 3 months of 2015, down from 3% in the prior quarter. That was the biggest reason for the drop-off in GDP. Americans cut back on buying new cars and other big-ticket items. It wasn't all bad news, though. Unseasonably warm weather reduced utility bills. Households also didn't have to spend as much on food or gas because of falling prices. Food didn't really fall, but gas did, I think. At least what I've seen. Inflation, as measured by the PCE index, slowed to a 0.1% annual rate from 1.3% in the third quarter, well below the Fed's 2% target. The central bank expects inflation to remain low in the near term, but eventually start to rise as the effect of lower oil prices fade. Yes, they're going to fade. I've been warning of this, and it'll fade. No, I think it's going to hit harder than what they're acting like it will. The nation's trade balance, meanwhile, deteriorated again and weighed on GDP. Exports fell 2.5% as a strong dollar and weaker growth in many foreign countries dented sales of American supplied goods and services. Imports rose 1.1%. Businesses, for their part, hunkered down at the end of 2015. Spending on equipment fell 5.3% to mark the third drop in the past 4 quarters. Outlays on structures also slid 1.8%, reflecting deep cuts in spending by energy producers struggling to cope with cheap oil. Warehouse restocking also tapered off. The value of inventories rose $68.6 billion versus an $85.5 billion advance in the third quarter. There was good news. Some good news. Home construction outlays jumped 8.1%, reflecting a pickup in building amid a steady rise in sales. More people can afford to buy homes after the biggest surge in hiring since the late 1990s. The strong pace of job creation explains why most economists think U.S. growth will snap back soon. And, I've heard people, and you can, again, find that at marketwatch.com. U.S. GDP fizzles in the fourth quarter. People go, why you look so down on the economy? I'm not looking, I'm pointing out problems that we have. And a lot of it, again, is the Federal Reserve, interest rate fixing, and all these other bubbles that get created. A lot of issues we have that we should address. Now, I want the economy to get good for the majority of people to be able to work, make a decent living, be able to have nice things, and I want that to happen. I'm not just going to be one of these people that I'm against all of this stuff and I don't want to participate at it. I think that, we it's good to be able to start a business, be creative, do things. And I would love for the economy to get better, but I think we have to address the issues. Otherwise, we're going to be manipulated into thinking everything's good and peachy when in reality it's not, and we're not seeing what's coming. When the economy does get better, I think that we should take as much advantage of that as we can. But watch how long term you get involved in things. Definitely when the economy is great. Because when the economy is peaking at just an incredible rate, there's inflation there. And that's exactly what happened with the housing bubble is, property values were extremely high. Therefore, yeah, you could sell your house for a lot more than what you bought it for, but those people just bought a house for more than what it really is worth. They get in a long-term mortgage, and then the market corrects itself, drops off sharply, and then slowly comes back up. And we've seen a lot of people that had the non-fixed interest rates that when the economy tanked, all of a sudden their interest rates skyrocketed. They couldn't afford their payments. They had their homes foreclosed on. Those same people that sold that house, they went and did the same thing, bought a house that was overpriced, got stuck in a, loan that had, at the time, low interest rates, but again, they weren't fixed, and bam, they get hit. We also seen corruption in the whole thing because, well, there was plenty of opportunity for it where somehow multiple banks bought the mortgage. One bank has been getting paid, the other bank forecloses. And it's really sickening to see that. And that's why, again, don't get in something long-term and be very wary of getting into anything you can't pay off within maybe a year or two when things are great. And no, I don't want to Bernie Sanders like Christopher Green was talking about with that, social democratic. Well, how's that socialism doing in Venezuela? Oh, yeah, they're on the brink of economic collapse right now. On the brink. That's out of Washington Post. Venezuela is on the brink of complete economic collapse. The only question is whether Venezuela's government or economy will completely collapse first. The key word there is completely. Both are well into their death throes. Indeed, Venezuela's ruling party just lost congressional elections that gave the opposition a veto-proof majority, and it's hard to see that getting any better for them anytime soon or ever. Incumbents, after all, don't tend to do well when, according to the International Monetary Fund, their economy shrinks 10% one year, an additional 6% the next, and inflation explodes to 720%. It's no wonder then that markets expect Venezuela to default on its debt in the very near future. The country is basically bankrupt. That's not an easy thing to do when you have the largest oil reserves in the world, but Venezuela has managed it. How? Well, a combination of bad luck and worse policies. The first step was when Hugo Chavez socialist government started spending more money on the poor, with everything from 2-cent gasoline to free housing. Now there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, it's a good idea in general, but only as long as you actually, well, have the money to spend. And by 2005 or so, Venezuela didn't. And, well, you never can. It's not a good idea, and it won't work because, well, you have to understand psychology, sociology. Go read Atlas Shrugged. They even have the movie out, 30-part segment, even though it still angers me that they have different cast members on 30 different parts. But go watch it. It's still a good movie for the basic ideology and philosophy behind it. It's hard to get a libertarian style movie made with big bucks, but go check it out. Says, why not? The answer is that Chavez turned the state-owned oil company from being professionally run to being barely run. People who knew what they were doing were replaced with people who were loyal to the regime, and profits came out, but new investment didn't go in. That last part was particularly bad because Venezuela's extra heavy crude needs to be blended or refined, neither of which is cheap before it can be sold. So Venezuela just hasn't been able to churn out as much oil as it used to without upgraded or even maintained infrastructure. Specifically, oil production fell 25% between 1999 and 2013. The rest is a familiar tale of fiscal woe. Even triple-digit oil prices, as Justin Fox points out, weren't enough to keep Venezuela out of the red when it was spending more on its people but producing less crude. So it did what all poorly run states do when the money runs out. It printed some more. And by some, I mean a lot more. That in turn became more, a lot that you can count once oil started collapsing in mid-2014. The result of this money printing, as you can see below, is that Venezuela currency has, by black market rates, lost 93% of its value in the past 2 years. Now you might have noticed that I talked about Venezuela's black market exchange rate. There's a good reason for that. Venezuela's government has tried to deny economic reality with price and currency controls. The idea was that it could stop inflation without having to stop printing money by telling businesses that they were allowed to charge and then giving them dollars on cheap enough terms that they could actually afford to sell at those prices. The problem with that idea is that it's not profitable for unsubsidized companies to stock their shelves and not profitable enough to subsidize ones to do so either when they can just sell their dollars in the black market instead of using them to import things. That left Venezuela's supermarkets without enough food, its breweries without enough hops to make beer, and its factories without enough pulp to produce toilet paper. The only thing Venezuela is well supplied with are lines. You can read the rest of that again. That was at WashingtonPost.com. Venezuela is on the brink of complete economic collapse. And the print money thing, I'm telling you, it's going to end up biting us right in the booty. Okay, let's see if I have this clip handy or not. Maybe. Okay. Now I got the Friday Ron Paul Liberty Report, the special Mythbusters, progressive neocons and cronies. And he goes over a lot of the myths of the debate. And when we look at our economy and we're looking at all this turmoil in it, where it's hard to judge where it's going to be the next day, if we're going to go up, down, and the uncertainty is going to continue to be there, definitely, with so many factors playing into it, because it is no longer a free market, that we have to take so many different factors into play. But this kind of covers some of that, some of the myths with the economy and the progressives, neocons, and cronies, Mythbusters, Ron Paul Liberty Report.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. Today is the day we talk about Mythbusters, and the co-host today is Chris Rossini. He is also the editor of the RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Chris, welcome to the program today.
Good morning, Dr. Paul. Great to be with you.
Good. Let's see if we can straighten a few things out in our own minds, as well as helping other people to understand issues that are going on today, because so often there's misinformation, misunderstanding as a consequence of the propaganda we hear, as well as our educational system. But what do you want to start off with today?
Well, let's start. We have a bit of a chicken and egg situation going on with Bernie Sanders and the Federal Reserve. Now, the Federal Reserve was created by Congress with an unconstitutional act, and Congress can abolish the Fed. The sooner the better. They can abolish the act. Yet Bernie Sanders says many people have the mistaken impression that Congress regulates Wall Street. The real truth is that Wall Street regulates Congress. Now, what do you think of this characterization, Dr. Paul?
Well, they have to ask a different question. Should the government be involved, especially the federal government, involved in regulating Wall Street? I understand Wall Street is in New York, and there are regulators there, and they might need to be involved at time if fraud is being committed. And I remember very clearly when Enron went bankrupt, it was a Houston company. They were under a lot of laws the federal government had passed. It was supposed to keep them above board. You know, we had the SEC, and we also had Sarbanes-Oxley, which came about because of this. And the assumption was that regulations would solve the problems that are created by the Federal Reserve System. So the better question is it worthwhile, is it helpful for the federal government to regulate trading actions in New York City and on Wall Street? And of course, if you look to the Constitution, you don't find anything in there that sets up a regulator. Nothing in the Constitution that sets up a central bank. So the real fallacy here is the acceptance of a regulator. Now, Bernie has a slight point. He says, the regulators, their good intentions are to regulate Wall Street and make them obey and do the right thing, not realizing that a bureaucracy in the business of regulating will always be corrupted by the people being regulated. So in one way, his noble intention is that if we had better regulations by the Congress, they could do a better job. But he's talking about, it turns out that Wall Street's regulating Congress. I don't know whether that's the right term, regulating Congress, but they own Congress, they influence Congress, and many of the banking regulations that end up getting written by Congress protect the very wealthy. And that's why no matter how many Dodd-Frank bills you pass, there will always be too big to fail. And under our system today, we have a banking system that guarantees a bailout, if necessary, the lender of last resort. So that is their responsibility. So that doesn't do it. Regulations cannot solve the problem of a deeply flawed monetary system. And we should give up on this idea that all we have to do is create a bureaucracy, and the infinite wisdom of bureaucrats will iron this out. Generally, what happens is you have people competing for the control. And in some ways, even though Bernie joins us in challenging the Fed when they bail out only the rich, his answer is, well, if I have control of it, I'm going to protect other people. And that is not the answer. The answer is to have honest money, and the market does a lot of regulating. That doesn't mean that most people assume that means it's a free-for-all. Banks and business people can do anything they want, and that is not the case. There's just no privileges, directed toward a certain group. But in a free market, money can't be counterfeited. You wouldn't have fractional reserve banking. You wouldn't have paper money. So it would prevent that because it's committing fraud and it's committing a theft. So the market would regulate it in a different manner, just as I pointed out. The Enron scandal in Houston, a lot of people went to jail over that because state law took care of that, and you don't need a huge bureaucracy which can be corrupted. So we should give up on this idea that regulations can compensate and make correct the mistakes that the Federal Reserve continually makes and are still very much involved in doing that. So we ought to look toward honest money and the Constitution for our answers.
Yes. Next, speaking of big bureaucracies, let's move over to the military side of things. And it should go without saying that everyone knows that the U.S. military is sprawled out all over the planet. And last year, a budget of $600 billion was allocated to the military, and it accounted for a whopping 54% of federal discretionary spending. 54%. And yet, Republican candidates like Donald Trump is out there saying, our military is a mess right now. We just let it go. There hasn't been proper investment. Dr. Paul, are the Americans that naive?
Some of them are, unfortunately. We have to wake them up because the other statement that they continually make is we have to rebuild the military. Yeah, last 8 years, it's totally deteriorated. We don't have enough fighter jets and we don't have enough ships. They're still fighting World War II in many ways. So this idea that it has to be rebuilt, we still spend more money than probably the 10 or 12 other countries next to us. So we're gigantic. And even when you add up countries like China and Russia, we're still way ahead. And when they look at it, they say, well, our responsibility is to defend the world. We're the policemen of the world. And it is our responsibility. We need a lot of money to do this. But if you look at it from a constitutional viewpoint, how much do we need to defend ourselves from any potential enemy invading us and destroying our liberties? Well, the greatest threat to our liberties is our own government. They're the ones who take away our privacy rights and freedom of movement and all the things that they do. So it's also misdirected. And besides, the conservatives who are always arguing, other than my son, Rand, everybody else is arguing for tremendous increases in the military, and they're conservative. Well, who pays for it? Well, the American people pay for it. Oh, well, will we raise tax? Oh, no, we don't raise taxes, which nobody likes to raise taxes, but they tax in a different manner. They print money, they borrow money, delay the payment, but there's always a tax, and that tax ultimately falls on the military, on the middle class. But the other thing that is a real myth is that if you spend more money, you get better defense. And I do not like to call it the DOD, the Department of Defense, and that we're spending this amount of money on defense. We need this much more money on defense. None of it goes to defense. It goes for right now, in these last 15 years, it goes for offense and gets us into trouble. And a lot of people die from it. A lot of Americans die, and a lot of foreign victims die as well. So we don't get more defense. We have a greater bill, and we never address the very important subject of policy, because we get into trouble and give people excuses for saying, Well, ISIS is out there, so therefore we have to double the military budget. And, and it's almost universal. And like I said, there's only the one exception. But it reminds me of what Nixon said when he closed down the doors on the gold standard. He made a statement that we're all Keynesians now. We've all given up on defending free markets and sound money and gold. So Republicans and Democrats are all Keynesians now. I think when you look at that stage and listen to the Republican debate, generally what I'm hearing is we're all neocons now. And they are, even though, and that goes for both parties. I would think Hillary's, with her viewpoint, she could be running in the Republican Party. And even though Obama on the surface wants to always appeal to progressives, he's part of that as well. So we have to change policy and understanding, and we have to expose these false arguments for our great need to make our world safe and secure and protect Americans. We need to spend a lot more money on the military, regardless of how much debt we have today.
Stay on the topic of neocons and cover some good hypocrisy here. We'll start with there are many people on the right who will claim that they're pro-life, and they talk about the sanctity of life over and over, the sanctity of life, which is great. However, the very same people will turn around and call for carpet bombing and destroying nations across the world, which consists of men, women, children, people, and the sanctity of life goes right out the window. So we'll go with neocon favorite Marco Rubio, who says, I'm deeply pro-life. I believe that all human life is worthy of the protection of our laws. Now, what do you think of when he leaves the abortion debate and moves on to other topics, Dr. Paul?
Well, he is. He's consistently pro-life, except when it has to do with maybe children dying from our bombs in Iraq, except if you're very poor and didn't have an attorney and you get ripped off in the judicial system and you're on death row. And so there's a lot of exceptions for those who claim they are pro-life. I at one time strongly supported, or at least endorsed, the concept of the death penalty. But I came around to thinking the pro-life position has to be opposed to it. Does that mean they're not guilty and they don't deserve it, especially if they're caught on camera? No, but if we lose it and use the death penalty carelessly, all of a sudden we hear of dozens of cases of people who've been on death row for 20 years and then they're exonerated because of DNA evidence. And a government, conservatives are always saying less government, except these conservatives who are strongly pro-life are also saying, well, in this area, we need big government. We need to be efficient. And, of course, Rubio supports the death penalty. And, matter of fact, he wants to speed it up so there is no delay on issuing the death penalty. But there's many areas that I've chided physicians who get involved in the various pro-life issues because one is torture. They usually have doctors standing by like they're approving it. If you're going to have torture, do you need a doctor there? And why should a doctor participate? Oh, we're watching to make sure that he doesn't die on the table. So I think physicians are totally unethical if they participate in torture. But these pro-life candidates, they may well be, some of them may be against the torture. But the other thing that happens, at wartime and other times, there's a lot of human experimentation, and they use doctors for that. I think doctors should be chided. The average politician isn't directly involved in that. But I think really it's the policy of our militarism, which has allowed us to make excuses for innocent children, and all innocent people die. And they call it didn't say like, well, a family of 20 died today from one of our drone bombs because we didn't know it would hit a wedding ceremony, and 20 individuals from one individual died today, and what a tragedy. No, a little bit of collateral damage, and we have to know that. And even Trump, I believe, he's the one that said that it should be a legitimate target to go after people like this. I don't know whether Trump's ever made a statement about pro-life. At least now he's pretending he is, which I believe that has changed. So being pro-life is not just saying that we're going to have a federal law prohibiting abortion. Matter of fact, under our Constitution, the issue of regulating or dealing with and punishing violence falls on the states. Murder and manslaughter, all these things are state issues. But all of a sudden, we've nationalized this issue with Roe versus Wade, and it's total chaos under this system. But just to say that I am strong pro-life under all conditions doesn't look into it as a gynecologist. I know there are some difficult times to deal with, ectopic pregnancies and the day after pill and a lot of these other things. But I think the most important thing is that all of us should be aware of the fact that life is precious. And if it meant nothing to dispose of life, we'd end up with where we are today. That sometimes when a baby is born and the woman that delivered the baby or a teenager that delivered the baby said, "Oh, well, I could have had a legal abortion, so I'm going to throw this baby away." And all of a sudden that creates questions because then they arrest her for this. So anyway, being pro-life, it's something that is a very important liberty. I claim you cannot be pro-liberty if you aren't pro-life. You have to save life. But I also recognize the difficulties and all the different situations and why that would be much better handled at a local area, just as our Constitution set it up to be.
Great. Finally, Dr. Paul, let's end with a subject that may not be in the headlines today, but it's very important, and let's shine some light on it. And that's the myth that the government agencies, the many ABC soup agencies that they have out there, are there to protect us. And let's talk about the FDA and that they supposedly protect us from dangerous drugs. And according to the government itself, the CDC, they say that more people die from FDA-approved drugs than illegal drugs. So I want to stress the following word here. Dr. Paul, what is your diagnosis on this?
Well, we don't have authority to have an FDA, and like you point out, they do more harm than good, even though there's good intentions and people are saying, well, who's going to protect us if we don't have an FDA? But the free market has answers for this. They will never be perfect, but I'll tell you what. When you have imperfections and you put them in the FDA and then they prohibit a good drug from coming on and legalizing a bad drug, just think of how much harm is done as compared to when it's done in the free market and they have to live up to the laws of prohibiting fraud and abuse and injury. So there's a big, big difference. The FDA sort of ushered in the progressive era. It was organized in 1906, but it's continually grow. And just like so many things, whether it's banking regulations or whatever, the banks end up writing the regulations. In the FDA, so often it's the drug industry that writes these regulations. But the interesting thing about the FDA, Chris, you mentioned the fact that they have created more problems than they solve, and they put bad drugs out on the market. But I, as a physician, if I would have just said, oh, this is FDA approved, I'm going to use it because I'm protected. The government said it's okay, but it doesn't happen that way. These drugs can cause harm. And you see the ads on TV begging and pleading for people to file suit because this drug did harm. Well, it was FDA approved. We had the stamp of approval. But still, the doctors can become liable on this. So it is a real mess to depend on bureaucracy to deal with it. But there is a lot of corruption. You see the exchange. The doctors will be on the FDA approving drugs at the same time. Then they go and work for the drug companies, and it invites corruption. It's a big deal. If you bring a drug onto the market and it's announced that particular 3 o'clock one day, the stock soars, and there'll be also always inciting trading on this. But there's another thing that people should think about right now, and that is free to choose. free to choose what you put in your own body. Yes, there is a lot of risk, and it is true that prescription drugs are more dangerous than street drugs because more people die from it. But you lose freedom to choose the good stuff. For right now, the consensus has come to understand our argument we've made for decades that marijuana is not as dangerous as they said, and that marijuana may well help a lot of people suffering from cancer and be very helpful in that treatment. So they, but if there's a drug out there that even if it's understudy and they have good results, let's say it's been tested for 6 months and it looks just fantastic, and you say, well, I'm willing to take a chance. Let me take that drug. But you're not allowed. You have to wait. You have to wait for the FDA. There's more and more delays on this. But I think any individual should be allowed to try and test anything they want. Yes, there will be some mistakes. And if there's lying involved, I mean, that is a vicious crime as well. But when it's up front and there's a drug and there's a chance, I think we'd move along with developing of new drugs much, much faster. But also, who would regulate if you didn't have the FDA to tell us this is good and this is bad and help the doctors out and say, yeah, you can use this? Well, there would be organizations. There would be consumer groups. Today, you can go on the internet and almost anything you want on a consumer item and find out what the people are saying and what kind of ratings they have. I often thought Ralph Nader happens to be a friend of mine, and we've worked together. But we had different opinion on how you protect consumers. But I often thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a consumer protection group in the private market and Ralph Nader was in charge? Because in a way, what Ralph Nader did in trying to protect us against dangerous items was he did it in the public arena. It wasn't the fact that he got the government's attention, but he got the information out and educated a lot of people, and then that put pressure on the Congress. So a lot could be done through voluntarism. People have give up too easy, and they listen to the demagogues and this idea that there would be so much danger if we didn't have the government. We didn't have the politicians. We didn't have the bureaucrats taking care of us. Besides, it won't cost anything because it's the government, and they will pay for it. That is a big myth that we ought to repeal. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. And Chris, I want to thank you for being with us today again on Mythbusters. And for all the viewers, I hope you enjoyed the program, and please come back to see us soon.
Ron Paul Liberty Report on YouTube, RonPaulLibertyReport.com. Check them out. Mythbusters, progressive neocons, and cronies. And it really shows, the extent of the money that gets used to abuse you. The war on drugs and being able to land grab and the wars overseas, the spreading of the military. Our spending on military is like, if you take, it's more than the next 5 countries combined. It's absolutely ridiculous to think that we're not spending money on the military when we see what law enforcement is able to use on us. Think of what the military has at their capabilities, stuff we don't know about. They're always ahead of us. Look at our stealth planes that we know about and how long the military has actually had those. And you look at everything, and then you look at the new X-Files coming out, if anybody's seen that. I'm not a big TV watcher, but I did catch the first episode. And it's really becoming so evident, more mainstream to a lot of people as a thought about where this country is going and, what the government's doing, that things like the X-Files can come back. There were so many shows and movies that used to question what the government does and question their corruptness. entertainment way, but also in a subconscious way where, you know, I believe that writers or directors were trying to convey something to people like, hey, you know, this is kind of going on. We could see it, and, you know, we're a part of the circle. We see these actors and actresses and what they believe and where they're putting their money towards, and, you know, this could become real. We see them mingle with the politicians, you know, come on, lobby groups. But I think, you know, we are winning our own war, and that's to educate and spread the message of liberty and freedom. And I think it's becoming something that is now becoming accepted mainstream. What we need to do is really spread more of the message of individual freedom and liberty, and you know, things like the non-aggression principle, and ways that we can coexist without trying to control the other side. How about we try to win them over to our side by love and respect, and if we are living our lives in a better way, we will project that, but we have to also project it in a loving manner, in a charitable manner, in a way too. And I think we are going to get there if we can continue to spread the message of freedom and individual liberty, and sticking together to fight that, and not, you know, allowing corruptness and evil to persist. We're still seeing more unfold with this whole, you know, Oregon standoff situation, and really, I don't want to see some civil war in my time. I don't want to see no violent revolution. I want to see the mindset of society change towards individual freedom and liberty, and we can win it that way if we go that direction. We're at the end of the broadcast. Don't forget to check out My Patriot Supply. If you go to antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot, it'll take you to My Patriot Supply, and you can get the same great deals, food supplies, seed vaults, all kinds of great products. And when you go through that link, you're helping support this broadcast at antityrannynews.com. And again, don't forget to check out ucy.tv and the Amazon tab down at the bottom for even more great prepping gear. Check them both out, antityrannynews.com/MyPatriot and ucy.tv. Scroll down to the bottom, hit the Amazon tab. And that will help support this broadcast, and supporting UCY will help support this broadcast and others on this network. Thank you again for tuning in. Have a great weekend. Think about freedom. Think of ways you can spread it. Spread UCY.tv around the internet. Spread it to friends, family. Don't forget, we are on the TuneIn app. Very, very important. Spread that, because that allows more people to access.
Just one chance to come back here.